Now, Sir Tony Blair and Lord William Hague have put their heads together and come up with a plan. They're proposing to sell our NHS medical records to create personalised AI doctors, as well as a future of new cures and treatments in Britain. It sounds all so lovely, doesn't it? So why are we all deeply cynical about this? We'll have a listen to what Tony Blair said recently.
And I also think this issue to do with the technology and the digital infrastructure, I just want to emphasise how important I think that is. Because in the end, you need the data. You need to know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't been. Some of the vaccines that will come on down the line will be multiple. There'll be multiple shots. So you've got to have, for reasons to do with the healthcare more generally, but certainly for a pandemic or for vaccines, you've got to have a proper digital infrastructure, and many countries don't have that.
And there's a reason for that, because they would be deeply unpopular, I think, with many members of the public, especially after events of the last 3 years. He makes it all sound so harmless, doesn't he, Daniel? He makes it all sound as though it would always be in our best interests, and my heckles go up when I hear this is going to be for your safety. How this story is moving on, of course, is that Tony Blair and William Hague have now said that they've got very excited about this data set. The NHS is a data set, and as we know, that is a very valuable commodity to have these days. And so they're excited to sell it, to set up a private company that would effectively, it's basically what Mussolini said, wasn't it, about corporatism is the merger of state and corporate power. I just see control. I see being dictated to about what you can and can't, what you should and shouldn't take, let's say, as medication in your body. And I have grave concerns about the fact that they couldn't possibly keep this data anonymous, which is what they're saying they're going to do. That's ludicrous. So they want our private data to sell it, to invest back into AI and doctors. Is it as dystopian to you as it sounds to me?
Well, my hackles go up as well when I see Tony Blair and my old friend William Hague, because it really is the blob on four legs, isn't it? Sort of push me, pull you of the establishment. But I think we need to be a bit more nuanced about this. I think, look, first of all, in this country, we made a bargain with the state back in the 1940s, and we said, we're no longer responsible for our health. The state is going to be responsible for our health. And part of that is we hand over all our data. They have all that information. And I don't think we're in a position now to say, you know, we want you to do all of this for us, but you can't actually exploit that. Second thing is, the fact is there is a reason why we were able to produce a vaccine for the pandemic before other countries, and part of it is that the National Health Service is a huge data set already. We are very good, the National Health Service is very good at running trials because it's a command and control organisation. So it can actually set up trials that can cover the whole country, large trials. Now, in a diffuse system like you have in Germany and France, where you don't have the command and control in the centre, and you have institutions that are independent and are receiving money from the state, but are not structured as a nationalised industry, which is what we have here. It's harder to set up that sort of system and to do the trials that help you get somewhere. So I think we need to acknowledge that, although the NHS has a lot of deficiencies, that socialist, Stalinist command and control structure that was set up in the 1940s when it was nationalised can bring some benefits, and they are mainly related to data, information and trials. So this information is valuable, it's valuable financially, but it's valuable medically. And it would be strange, I think, if we weren't using it. The involvement of the private sector is something that is a separate story, whether that is acceptable. And, of course, there's the question what the money would be spent on, because they're going to spend it on all this wonderful stuff, whereas you and I know it's bound to be spent on an extra layer of HR managers.
Very possibly. And it could be, you're right, the NHS could be, you could do that research into cheaper drugs, maybe, that could be repurposed drugs. Won't be that, though. Will it, Aaron? It won't be that.
Well, look, there's a line in journalism, isn't there? Follow the money.
Yeah.
So Oracle, I'm sure your viewers and listeners out there are familiar with this company, owned by a gentleman called Larry Ellison. Not owned, he's the CEO. Oracle have already given $100 million to the Tony Blair Institute. $100 million. They plan, over the next several years, to give up to $375 million. Now, in 2022, Oracle bought Cerner, which is a medical records company in the United States, for $30 billion. Oracle and Larry Ellison are fascinated by the digitisation of medical records and applications in AI. And guess what? Vaccines.
Of course.
And what has Tony Blair been talking about non-stop on the World Economic Forum, Davos merry-go-round for the last couple of years? Precisely those two things. Dare I say there may be some relationship between all the money going into his little pet project, the TBI, and the things he's arguing for. And this is a major issue, actually, going forward under a Labour government. Okay?
It is.
I prefer a Labour government to a Tory government, but I'm under absolutely no illusions about some bad things that could happen.
He's circling. Tony Blair is circling around Starmer at every opportunity. You see, he's smelling the blood and he's sniffing the money that might be available once.
Yeah, and people talk about right-wing think tanks who don't declare their funding, blah blah blah. I think that's right, good, true, correct. Very few people like James O'Brien on LBC and whatnot. You're not going to criticise fellow journalists. I will. They'll talk about it on the right, but they don't say, hold on, there's Tony Blair over there. He's trying to influence the policy of the next Labour government, and he's receiving hundreds of millions of pounds from American billionaires, the Saudis, the UAE, the Qataris. Nobody says a word. It's puzzling to me.
Yeah. Do you think, Daniel, when these issues are raised, because this isn't, as far as I know, Tony Blair and his plan to lead a biotech revolution hasn't been debated in the House of Commons or the House of Lords?
I'm not, as far as I'm aware, no.
No. And this is part of the problem, isn't it? That somehow what he is involved in this sort of march of AI, I know that the Prime Minister is a huge fan of artificial intelligence and it's something that he feels very strongly about. But it feels like digging into the pros and cons, the cost-benefit analysis of these sorts of life-changing steps is not being done in the right places. It's not being done in Parliament. Is that partly, do you think, because it's just quite difficult to understand? Some of it is quite, especially the tech stuff, it is quite tricky to understand, and therefore it's just sort of not getting dealt with.
No, I think the answer is, and I don't want to sound like a mad conspiracy theorist, but there is an establishment which straddles the establishment wing of the Conservative Party, the establishment wing of the Labour Party. Many of the professional institutions, royal colleges, institutions like that, a large part of academia, and certain parts of the corporate sector as well. And they have forums in which they get together and they discuss what they want to do. And then these decisions get taken, and Parliament and the public are only brought in where there's an absolute necessity for them to make a decision which enables those decisions. But the consensus is, and the direction of travel is very often created away from the public eye, and that's very deliberate. And I think people are more conscious of that, and it's what is feeding in part the sort of revulsion against the establishment, the establishment political parties that we're seeing, and some of the policies being pursued, because people are much less trusting of politicians. They're not trusting them, that they're making decisions that are uninfluenced by external factors without listening properly to what people think. And this is just one example of that. And I think the parties and the politicians have to get real about this and understand that unless they actually take people with them and persuade them, these things will not be durable and they won't get their way. Same is happening at the moment on trying to align with the get back in alignment with the EU, for example.
Yeah, and the trust has gone.